All right, welcome back to Is There Life After Acts for Luke, and this is session 8. How you doing, Gary?
I'm doing well, thanks, Chris. How about yourself?
Caffeine induced awake. That's all I can say.
Caffeine, okay.
so, so we're
Will we see you sip every once in a while there?
no, ran out. I already drank it
Oh,
all. so, so we're approaching a session today, which personally is near and dear to my heart, and I'm going to put up the map that we sort of left off on last session, which is just as a reminder where Luke is. Luke had left Rome after Paul's execution, and he made a journey. And the team sort of went in their different directions, and we talked a lot last session about Luke coming up, going through the Gaul area, down through Dalmatian, and ending up in Corinth. And as we in our own lives have seen, certain things happen which shape our life, shape our outlook on life, or however you want to say it. And some of those are natural disasters. And we can think of times in our own experience, 2018 flood of Lago Vista, where the lake came up and flooded a lot of houses. We remember that. We remember walking down the street and seeing no parks because they were totally underwater. I think back to Hurricane Harvey, which hit the Gulf Coast and really changed that region. It's a prime topic because we just got back from Port A, where that hurricane came inland and really destroyed it. And we saw houses, years later, still being repaired. Well,
and Chris, you saw it specifically, personal experiences because of your work with Austin Disaster Relief Network.
yes,
So,
I sure did. Like I said, we were just down at Port A, and right there by the beach, you saw houses still being rebuilt.
wow.
We spent a lot of time in Rockport, where the Hurricane Harvey came up Port Arthur, or Port not Port Arthur, excuse me,
Port
Port
Aransas.
Aransas,
Yeah.
stopped there, and then came out by Rockport, and then came up the Gulf and came into Port Arthur area and all that. So it's like three hurricanes in one. And yeah, we saw it there. And those experiences shape your view on life. They shape your future. And we're going to talk specifically about an event that happened that shaped the life of Luke and shaped the life of people around Luke. And what's interesting is, just to give it away a little bit, there are biblical characters that we have come into contact with earlier in the book of Acts itself, that all of a sudden Luke and these characters and other characters that we may have heard of but didn't ever think about all come together at a point in time because of a natural disaster. And so, Gary, let's talk a little bit about that natural disaster.
Mm, yeah. It's a what would you think, a hot summer night? Probably it's August in on the Gulf Coast, if you will, the Campania Naples Gulf Coast of Italy, and there'd been like a little shaking and earthquake earlier in the uh, earlier that people kind of were jumpy about, but then Mount Vesuvius that overlooked this resort area with a fantastic reputation for living in a place where the a lot of people that were from Rome had a second home and often spent a lot of time down there. It blew, and as most volcanoes do, it happens in stages. And it's unusual for us to think, like, if something like that happens now, there's news coverage, there's video, you can watch it from different angles. I mean, it's just amazing. Well, there's no video then. There's no camera crews to capture it for newsreel even, or there's just, and there's only one remaining or surviving eyewitness account that is left to us, that was made by a person we now know as Pliny the Younger. And he might have not even been able to have done that, because he did this account decades later at the request of the historian Tacitus. But Pliny the Younger at the time had been invited by his uncle, who he lived with his mother and her brother Pliny the Elder, who was an admiral. He was a Navy admiral, and he traveled quite a bit of the Mediterranean world, had written a geography, if you will, to describe many places there. So very famous, both as an author and as a naval admiral. And on the map there, you can see where it says Pizzuli. That's around where he was stationed at Misenum, where there was a naval base there. And he all of a sudden, the aunt, Pliny the Younger's mom and sister of Pliny the Elder, looks out and she sees this plume of cloud in the sky. And she gets everybody else's attention to look at it, coming from Vesuvius. And Pliny the Elder got curious, and so he got a boat or a small ship and got some guys to get out on the water and see what was going on. And it turned out that while things were happening, he started getting other boats coming to him with messages of help, that people he knew were asking for help and rescue from the Roman Army, Navy. And so he organized a big rescue party, basically, and went back out. And he was headed, go back out a little bit, because where he ended up going on shore was down, let's see if it shows us that area, down where it says let's see, Sorrento, I guess, is probably the name of the place that there. It was Baye at the time, but that's exactly where he started to come on shore, and a little, maybe a little north of that. And he goes into the town that's there, talks to the people, and organizes and tells everybody, "Hey, meet us at the shore in the morning, and we're gonna get you out here. We're gonna put you on the ships, and we're gonna take you out of the zone." And so he spends the night. They get up in the morning, and on the beach, the Vesuvius has this big explosion, hot gas traveling at 100 miles an hour, and poisonous, noxious fumes. And he goes down on the beach there, as well as several others, and they get buried by all the ash and everything. And it's only in the 20th century that they found, early in the 1900s, they found his body, along with probably his servant, found their skeletal remains, and did now into the 21st century, they actually did DNA testing on it, and kind of, what would you say, 23andMe kind of testing, or Ancestry.com testing to establish that these bones came from the area that Pliny was from. And the assistant, who was probably a freedman, had been a slave. He was from where he was from. And so it was fascinating that into the 21st century, we finally discovered this famous person in his own day. that and his remains there, as well as those that they were attempting to save. We don't know what happened to the ships out there, but they evidently did get away, and there were other people who made it, who had been with him on the trip. Had been he was probably pulling up the rear, if you will, getting people onto the boats, and it's one of those amazing stories that Pliny the Younger is able to tell, because some of those people that were with his uncle had told him the story. Tacitus, the historian, then asked decades later for him to recount that, and that's the only eyewitness report we have of the terror. Because even where they lived there, and you can see Mycenaeum there, that's where that naval base was, they experienced the fallout of the ash and the lapilli and these pieces of things, and it was terrifying, and people were running, trying to get out of that area. And remember, they can't get in a car and drive away. They can't, they're on foot, and everybody was on foot trying to get away. And but they eventually, things calmed down and everybody went back to where they were, but not in Pompeii, not in Oplantis there, not in Herculaneum, not in Stabe. All that whole area that's shaded on that map shows the burial areas from all the stuff. And let's see, Pompeii accumulated 16 to 20 feet deep of the ash and the rocks, etc. And evidently with Pompeii, there were still things popping out. And you might want to show, you had a Google Earth map there of Pompeii today that shows the theater, and fantastic, as they've, with the archaeological park in Pompeii, have dug out whole areas of the city so that it's a major place for tourists to go and to see what happened in Pompeii.
Yeah, because this area right here is the old city.
Yes,
and
these are all topless buildings, if you will, ancient ruins that have been dug out.
And let's just go down to the street.
Yeah,
and
which is an amazing shot, because we've shown some visuals of Rome itself, very similarly looking, but the visuals we've shown in the past have it all built out, and this shows the ruins now. But you can just imagine the active street life of Pompeii.
I mean, you can see right into these homes.
Yeah,
which is absolutely amazing. And you talked about the theater, and here the theater is right here. And why don't we just sit in the middle of the theater real quick?
Yeah, it's so incredible what we can do now. And there it is. There's the seating, as you'd be looking where we're standing in the picture, is sort of in the orchestra pit, if you will, of the theater, and looking out at the audience.
And I mean,
amazing.
Yeah,
so it would have been sticking out. You can see it was taller, than the 20 feet. So as people came, it was still hot, noxious gases and all. So not even treasure hunters were successful in getting away with anything there for quite a while. And so relief and disaster relief that came was not focused on that area, because they couldn't even get to it, couldn't even attempt to get to it. It was the people that had survived and got out of that area for the 24 hours after it had really started.
Yeah, so it's just amazing to look at. And I guess, when we maybe someone's asking right now, that's awesome, great history lesson. Why do we care about this Mount Vesuvius eruption? Why do we care about this ancient relief effort, this guy coming from here and coming over here and trying to help people in this thing. Why does this all matter to us? And why are we talking about this when we're trying to, this is a Bible study about, what happened to Luke. How do you answer that?
So I'm not going to answer about Luke yet.
Okay.
But I will answer that it's an answer to a question, and that is, what Bible character actually died at Pompeii in the eruption of Mount Vesuvius? And
well, hold on a second.
We've talked about it. We had no clue. Yeah.
Da dee da 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 dee da dee da da. Yep. Da 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 da. All right, make your guess.
All right. Final answer.
What's your final answer in Jeopardy? So,
yeah, well, in the book of Acts, Paul speaks before the governor Felix, and along with Governor Felix is his wife Drusilla, and it's Drusilla and her son that are in Pompeii and are killed in the eruption of Vesuvius. And we only know about it because Josephus, the Jewish Roman historian, mentions it in one of his later books. And he says when he writes it, and I'm going to tell you more about it a little later. And the crazy thing is, he never got back to it. Either he was planning on writing some more and it's lost, or he just forgot. And there is so much that would be solved by this if he'd have gotten back and talked to us about it. But that's neither here nor there. Drusilla is a fascinating person, and if you have access, we encourage you to read the text that's there, because we do a little further biography of Drusilla. But she was a great granddaughter of Herod the Great, who's famous in the Bible for being the king of Judea when the wise men come, and much more famous in history at that time. And worthy reading. He was hobnobbing with the stars. He was the best friend of Mark Antony for a while, until Mark Antony and Cleopatra even entertained her, until they turned on Octavian at the time, and who became Augustus. And that's a whole story right there for somebody to look up. But anyway, Drusilla is a great granddaughter, so she's in that kingly. She's a princess, basically, in the Herodian family line, and she. Interestingly enough, what they usually did was they sent the boys in the family, Herodian family. They sent the boys to Rome and had them grow up and befriend all the people that were the people to know. And to ingratiate yourself with politically, so that when they got sent back, they were at one with the Roman emperors and their administrations. What they did with the gals, the girls in the family, is they would marry them off, and I'm talking early age, but that's third world, and this was third world in that sense, and they'd married them off when they were 14, childbearing age, essentially. And they'd marry him off to other royalty in the area. And so Drusilla, same thing, was pledged in marriage a few times. And the third time she's married, she gets taken away by Felix the governor, the new Roman governor, who's in Judea, is so taken with her, he woos her and has her leave her husband and divorce him and marry Felix. And they had a long and happy marriage, longer than any of the other marriages that she'd had. And so fascinating story, Bible character that we bump into when she's with Felix and he's governor, and the riot in Jerusalem at the temple happens. and Paul is the victim of a death plot before he leaves Jerusalem, and they get him anywhere else. There's a plot on his life, and Felix's right hand man Lysias, who's the tribune in Jerusalem, and this is in the book of Acts, kind of packs him away with a heavy guard. He's got an equestrian unit. He's got foot soldiers, and they take him to Caesarea by the sea, which is the Roman provincial capital, essentially, for the Judean group. Yeah, and we're going to fly in there. And that's where Drusilla is with Felix in Caesarea, and at the Herodian palace. So for her, it's kind of a family retreat, and for Felix, it's the tough governor's assignment to be at the seaside resort called Caesarea Maritima, or Caesarea by the Sea. And so it tells us essentially that Felix asked to speak with Paul several times, and that Felix's motivation was he was hoping to get some money, some bribery money. And the story goes, I mean, Paul was there in Jerusalem originally to deliver a collection of money from the Macedonian churches and the Greek churches, and so he must have known about the money part of it, and maybe they hadn't who knows? He just thought, well, this guy's got connections, and so maybe I can bribe him. But there may have been more to it than that. And Drusilla being a Jew, Felix was not, but Drusilla being Jewish, Drusilla was also in the priestly line of the Hasmoneans, which was both a king and priest dynasty. So she was twice a princess from mother and father. And she was able to, she might have gotten something out of it. It may have been something more to her than just, bribery money. So it tells us they spoke several times. And so this is the interesting thing about this study with looking at beyond Acts is, in this case, because of Luke's life, we're going beyond Scripture. Vesuvius is in 79 AD, and Drusilla being there is beyond the scriptural time for Paul and the letters that we have. So, and there's Caesarea, by the way.
I was trying to get trying to get a decent view of it.
Yeah, well, amazing harbor at the time. Was considered, it was the first underwater concrete pour ever known, that Herod directed construction for. And Herod's palace is there on one of those little jetties, so that this is where Paul was staying, kind of in the back end of it, with the Praetorium, where the soldiers were headquartered.
Yeah, I wish I had a better view.
Yeah, that's okay. But you get the idea. It's right on the beach. It's right on the coast. Very desirable location.
Yeah, right there is where he'd have stayed, because the amphitheater's right here. Let's see if I can.
So, yeah, it's a quite a spot. So, and it was well thought of in the day. There's the tourist bus to go see stuff. And people still love to go, because, in fact, that theater is one of the best preserved in the Roman Empire as well, as they've dug it out, and still used as a theater today. They've got modern lights and sound. There it is. So they can do concerts and various presentations there. But fascinating world. So Drusilla's one of the reasons we're finishing a Bible character's life here. And what happened was Felix got called back to Rome by, well, who was Felix's boss? It was Nero. And this is the time where Nero's starting to go off the rails. And he,
to say the least.
yeah. And so he pulls Felix, and Drusilla goes with him to Rome. And Drusilla probably grew up in Rome in her very early childhood days. She had a couple siblings that grew up with her there in Rome, and so going back to Rome, probably had gone back and forth anyway, and they were Jewish and Roman, and that's kind of one of the themes for this particular session too, is that this session also, I should say, so we don't get numbers mixed up, that not everybody in the Jewish revolt later on believed that the Jewish nation should be revolting. There were people that were welcoming of the Romans to be there for peace and security, and to be economically be tied to the rest of the Mediterranean world. And Drusilla was one of those, and a princess to boot, that was for them. Anything else?
Yeah, I was going to say that.
Say about Drusilla.
I mean, the one thing that strikes me as we talk about these things is sometimes when we read the Bible, we pass through these names that are mentioned. You know, Felix, that scene there is sort of just this, side scene to Paul, if you think about it. I mean, but there's so much going on that it's like God put that in the story, in the narrative, for a reason. And sometimes we pass over these names and we're like, okay, great, that's just like, those are just little pieces in scripture that don't have any meaning, but they do. Paul is in front of, and Luke is there with him, whether in the room or outside the room, whatever it may be. Luke is there with him. And does this story, I'm going to ask a question that I don't know the answer to, is so that story in Acts, that's the only mention of them in scripture.
The only mention of Drusilla once.
Yeah.
And it doesn't explain who she is, other than she's Felix's wife. Doesn't tell you she's a princess twice over. Doesn't tell you anything other than Drusilla, his wife, who is a Jew, it came with him to talk to Paul and listen to Paul as he talked about life. And so it's amazing. I think in many ways they were assuming you knew who these people were. Yeah. Because they were people still alive when Luke had written it in 62, as we believe, that these were living, and that Drusilla and her sister, Bernice, they were like, I don't know that I should say this, but they were like the Kardashians of the day. Right. Everybody knew about them, at least in the Judean area and in Rome, no doubt, because they made a splash. They were these two beautiful women. Their beauty was written about by historians, and written about that their beauty enraptured these Roman personalities in high places. So they were fascinating characters then that people followed for good or bad. And again, 24 of Acts. Drusilla, just simple mention, none of the background to who this person is, but to do just a Bible study on that one name, that one mention, that one person takes you into that world and creates where Paul was active and getting more active with as the book of Acts goes on.
Well, you hit on it. I'm going to put it as context is important. That name would have been assumed that, again, if Luke is writing this in Rome, all right, and it's going out to the churches, he assumes that they already know who this person is. And the reason that he assumes that is because he's in Rome writing this, completing it. And this is these are the stars. These are the gossip folks that everybody knows and is talking about. And to connect those dots from something that happened in Jerusalem to something that's being written and finalized in Rome, he knew everybody knew it, and so it has a ton of meaning because it just brings to life. This is written in a day where people would know it. If we were writing something today on Facebook and we mentioned something, a name, people would already know the context and they would already know what would be going on.
Right. Wouldn't have to explain it all like we need to do for these folks.
Sure. I mean, so it's great that we've got this context. So
we have no idea. We believe Felix, her husband, had passed away by this time, whether he was executed by Nero or what it was. But all we know is that she's in Pompeii, which was the backyard for Rome and kind of the place to be, and with her son, and loses her life in that eruption. And there's one other fascinating thing. I don't know how many people it is. I hadn't found any source that said, but very few named people. We've just named two of the very handful of people that we know actually died there. Pliny the Elder, in the second day of the eruption, and then Drusilla and her son. He's not even mentioned in there, though we know his name from other places. So it's again fascinating that these two people are mentioned, and they're part of this whole story of Vesuvius. And Drusilla, mentioned, one of the Bible characters, shows up also in Josephus.
So let's get back to Luke, because I can tell you this from being in disaster relief. What ends up happening is there are groups of people that hear about something happening. In this day and age, it's very easy to hear about a disaster happening. In those days, it would have been a little bit different. But when they hear it, they run towards the storm. All right. And so I purposely tried to put this map in a place that you can sort of see us graphically. We left Luke down here in the Corinth area. Now it could be anywhere in this area, but he's probably in this area. This event happens up here, and it's not going to take long for the coconut telegram, or however you want to call it, of the Roman Empire, for that news to spread out. And people then are going to, that are into helping people, are going to flock there to help. And we suspect that Luke has been involved with basically humanitarian aid, humanitarian services for probably a lot of his life. I think we've already talked about, in Corinth, we had some earthquakes that happened there. We know that Philippi.
Yes, Philippi, where we get the story from Paul's and Barnabas's or Silas's viewpoint, that they're in jail and they're in chains and in stocks down in the dungeon, and there's this massive earthquake that knocks even the locked doors open, and the chains are off the guys because they've come out of the rocky walls, and the whole prison's basically an open door, and everybody could escape. And they talk everybody into hanging out, to staying. And when the guard comes in, he's ready to do himself in because he knows the authorities will do it if he doesn't. And they stop him, and there's a whole story of this man and his whole family being baptized that night and coming to Jesus as Messiah. And what happens here is, up till here, we'd started with the we sections where Luke is saying, hey, we traveled here, we traveled there, and we're in Philippi now. And in Philippi, he switches to they when Paul leaves. And in fact, for like 3 chapters, Paul will be now in Athens and Corinth and all kinds of other places. And only when they come back to Philippi will Luke pick back up with them and be on the team again and start the we sections again. And there's lots of speculation why that happens, but I'm convinced that Luke, as a doctor, as a physician, becomes a medical missionary. They've just founded a church there in Philippi, and what an incredible opportunity to show Christ's love in practical ways, like Luke's done all his life, particularly his Christian life, to be able to be part of the healing arts and to help people out that way. So I really believe that was a disaster relief or disaster recovery ministry for Luke to stay in Philippi and stay with the people there that they just embraced in the Christian family.
Yeah, because Philippi's I think in this area right up in here, because there's Thessalonica.
Yes.
So think about this.
Well, it's actually, yeah, that's good enough.
I'm trying to see if
it would be, down the road from Thessalonica, kind of back, the other way. You're right. Yeah. So anyway, it's fascinating to see him do that. And then later, when they're leaving Rome after the book of Acts says they were there 2 years in chapter 28, and they head out, we've chronicled the visit that they go back to the Aegean again. They stop at Crete and they drop Titus there for some church leadership. They go to Miletus and drop Timothy there to go to Ephesus. But while they're there, they're also from Miletus going to take a trip up the Lycus River and going to visit Colossae. He had said in his letters, like Philemon and Colossae, hey, get ready, I'm going to come visit. And so this is that time where after prison, after house arrest for almost 5 years, 2.5 in Caesarea and another 2.5 in Rome, can a guy get any break and relax? So the Hierapolis, for instance, near Colossae, was a resort area with hot springs, and so here was an area they finally got to visit, and that they had an earthquake in the early 60s as well, which could have happened just before they ended up on their trip there. Or it could have happened, who knows, during their trip as they're heading there. We just don't know. It doesn't get mentioned again, but it doesn't get mentioned at all. But we know from historical writing and that area suffered from a massive earthquake again. And Colossae as a city was practically decimated. It continued as a little village after that, but Laodicea, Hierapolis, some of those other places continued to thrive more than Colossae. But there again, Luke was with Paul on that trip, and you could see them doing, while they were spending that time there, also some disaster relief, medical missionary work, and comfort, just Christian comfort to this congregation of people. So he's got that experience. And so like you said, when Vesuvius happens, the deal about Corinth and him being the bishop of Cenchreae, or at least living in that area, he isn't bishop yet there. But the thing about Corinth was it was the gateway to Rome from the east in the winter months. I think we talked about this in a previous session, in that if instead of traveling like Paul's shipwreck did down in the further south and south of Crete, you would go into the Aegean there, and you'd go. It was only 4 miles from the one end at Cenchreae, which was the southeastern harbor, to Lechion, which was the northwestern harbor. And with those 4 miles, you could by land haul the goods to another ship. Some people believe they actually hauled ships across, but nonetheless, in that 4 miles, you got back in the ocean and were zipping again in safe waters, where those storms like the Euraquilo that hit them in Acts 27, you didn't get those. They weren't dangerous. So that this was the winter passageway to Rome for several months, and this is where goods and services and transportation happened. So this was the gateway to Rome. And so you just got out there, and you're there on the southern tip of the boot somewhere, some of the ports, and you can take roads back in there, or you can go to a harbor on that eastern coast of Italy. But so for Luke to hear about Vesuvius, which was a monumental disaster of the day, and this is an opportunity to see something that's why Pliny the Elder had gone. He'd never seen an eruption before, and so he got closer just to look and see what was going on, and then became part of the first responders that unfortunately lost their lives in it. Luke comes as a subsequent responder, knowing his experience with helping people, whether it was Paul in the carcer at the Mamertine prison, or whether it was with Paul, all the places they went, and he got problems. And like he was the personal physician, kept Paul alive for a lot more years than Paul might have lived without. And or as a ship's doctor, some believe he served as a ship's doctor for several years out there. So because he knew way more about nautical terminology of the day than many people. So his experience would have been invaluable to the survivors in Pompeii.
So Luke gets from this area up here. Many different ways, like you say, you can do it. But he gets up here, and I can tell you from experience that when you go to, if you're someone that is used to helping out with disasters, when you get to a disaster, more likely than not, it's like a homecoming for the people that serve.
Yes.
Okay.
Wow.
I could tell you this, that I see. We saw more people that we knew than new people. It's the same. It's the same rodeo, just a different location. And so Luke gets to this area. Who else is he running into?
Yeah, I can tell you from personal experience too with the Gerald tornado.
Oh yeah.
There was I was working at the time with Church World Service on their Texas board, and organizing fundraiser walkathons, and they had us go to Gerald, and there was a big powwow of all the disaster relief organizations and people, just to coordinate, just to say, hey, this is why we're here, this is why we're here, and just to, so that if there's duplication of services, there's cooperation with it there, and finding out and I'm sure they were smart enough back then to all talk to each other, at least kind of find out where the need was and how to fit in and how to coordinate all that. And so Luke arrives there, and he's going to find, of all people, interestingly enough, the Emperor Titus, because Titus Vespasian, his father, died earlier, just months before, in the beginning of summer, and that made Titus become the emperor. And so Titus is just like 4 months into being an emperor, and boom, he has this incredible natural disaster happen to many people that are attached to Rome, let alone just very close. And so Titus had probably helped out with the Corinthian earthquake. Not Corinthian. There is also a Corinthian earthquake I didn't talk about.
Right.
And which is in the early 70s in Vespasian's reign. And Vespasian actually rebuilds Corinth. They replot the whole thing and reinvite people and to come get a land grant, become a Roman citizen, and have privileges beyond your wildest dreams. And that's when Luke was already there. He was already living there a few years after arriving, and they have this amazing governmental response to rebuilding the harbors, because it was such a economic import, like I said, being the gateway for goods and services and people in the winter months. That they got real involved. And Titus was Vespasian's right-hand man, and sent Titus on jobs like this. And we believe that they had worked together already. And because, again, Luke being there, having the experience in Colossae and Philippi before, this is like the third earthquake, then second one he lives through, and has that experience with him. So who's in charge of this? Well, Titus jumps right away after the eruption and heads down to this area, and Naples is probably the place where he headquartered his recovery efforts. And that's where a lot of people ended up to get out of that southern area, because when Vesuvius went, it was basically south and west of them where that zone was. And so Naples was a safe place. And so he, that's where I'm guessing Luke might have ended up, or, any one of those communities somewhere around where people were going. But that was the area north where people were heading to get the families or slaves, you name it, who survived the eruption. That's where things were happening.
And I'm going to make an assumption here, because the wind is coming this way.
Yes.
All right. So if Luke is down here, he's probably coming up the coast, coming into a port here, and coming up north and around, because Rome is up here. So you're not going to be flowing down this way, because that's going to be in the path of the smoke and the ash. You're going to be going up this way and coming over, just from a pathway standpoint. So he probably lands up in a port, anywhere in this area, and travels one of the roads, because there's roads to come back down to this. And so a northern base camp makes, obviously perfect sense. And one thing that's interesting, note, governmental agencies, when there's a disaster, they will take help from non-governmental agencies, even if they don't like them. That's been going on for 2,000 years. At a time of disaster, it's amazing. A government agency, which you look at places like Samaritan's Purse, where they come in, when they can provide help, they can be a true enemy, ideology wise, of the hosting country. But you know what? The hosting country needs them. So for a group of like Luke to come in as a trained physician, to come in and offer his services, ideology gets thrown out the door, at
Mm-hmm.
least for a period of time.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Absolutely. And so, what another connection for Luke in that work is, along with Titus, Titus probably wasn't there alone. He probably brought his famous and infamous live-in lover, whom he really wanted to marry, but the Roman population looked askance at this romance that had really started several years before during the Jewish revolt. And it's a Bible character. So this is an answer to one of those questions again, those Jeopardy questions. What Bible character was the live-in lover of a Roman emperor for like a decade and a half,
and
or at all?
And I bet you this person. I bet you she was with. What was his name again?
Titus,
and
and
she was
the
with
other.
Paul. She was in
Oh,
Jerusalem.
Luke.
Oh,
because she's in the book of Acts. In fact, she's in the next chapter, 25 and 26. In fact, she's the sister, though the book of Acts doesn't tell us again because it assumes you know she's Drusilla's sister. So she's not here just with Titus for disaster relief. She has lost an immediate family member, Drusilla.
What would be her name? What would be her name?
Her name, we know her in the story in 25 and 26 as Bernice.
Yeah.
Though in the literature, she's also called Berenice. They add a little E in there between the R and the N. And she is the one that was even more famous than her sister Drusilla. And her brother, Agrippa II, is also a Bible character. And they were very close. And they hung out together. In fact, they were king and queen of Chalcis, which was nothing to us, but for there, that was a very important office to have because you were in charge of the temple in Jerusalem. And you picked the leadership, the high priest, for instance, and oversaw the logistics of the temple as well. So Bernice and Agrippa II were pretty amazing. So again, if they're Drusilla's siblings,
yep,
we're talking about prince and princess or queen and king with 2 times over. They're of the Herodian line. Their great grandpa's Herod the Great. Their father is Agrippa I, who's also a Bible character, and they are heavily involved in the Jewish revolt in that they take the side of the Romans and invite the Romans to be a part of it. And they have troops that they take with them to fight along with the Roman troops, as well as Bernice had inherited a whole valley of agriculture in the north. That it was interesting, the Jewish rabbis didn't believe it ought to be considered part of the Holy Land because it was so full of Gentiles and Gentile influence. And that was part of that look at Galilee as like, Galilee, what good is Galilee?
Yep.
But she had a bread basket, if you will. They had incredible grain fields in that area, one of the most verdant of all. And she had storehouses of food, and she allowed Vespasian and Titus, as they were the leaders of the Roman response finally to the Jewish revolt, and she fed the troops that way. And lots of other stories about her, that just amazing person. Again, lived a life a lot like Drusilla, but she ended up with, when Titus, General Titus at 30 years old, shows up with troops, they fall in love right away. And they start this love affair during the Jewish revolt. and it carries on. So that's like 67 probably when they met, and that started, and that carried us all the way to 79 here. And you can make a case for it, and I do it in the writing using scholars that have studied it. You can make a case for saying they never left each other's company, though people told them to, and Titus actually had to make some official pronouncements that they weren't together. There were ways to stay together, and they tell us, well, he kicked her out, or he asked her to leave the city of Rome. Well, he had places up north in the family estates and villas up in the mountains where he could tuck her away, and he went all the time to that we have recorded, and spent a lot of time there. And he spent months, almost half a year, in this area with the recovery effort. Didn't seem to miss Rome at all.
Nope. Amazing how that happens, isn't it? So basically, again, it's context and understanding the culture of that time. Here we
and
have
understanding the Bible characters that Paul interacted with, and this is the longest speech and the longest stretch in the book of Acts of an event. It's the description of Agrippa too and Bernice coming to visit the new governor Festus, and there's this amazing description of this meeting and this kind of final defense Paul lays out, probably going to take it with him to Rome. As he's honing his argument to say, hey, I didn't do anything wrong.
Yeah.
And gets to talk about Jesus to kings and queens, which was, I'll just mention it and then I'll be quiet for a little bit. When Ananias comes in Damascus to Paul, when God tells Ananias to go to Paul, and Ananias says, are you kidding me? This guy's killing Christians. You want me to go see him? You want me to be friendly with him? And God tells him, I've got big plans for this guy. He is going to speak to kings and queens on behalf of me. And these were the stories with Drusilla and Bernice and Agrippa too, and Festus and Felix. These are the stories that start that in a big way, leading up to the emperor's court itself in Rome. So that is being fulfilled right before our eyes in Scripture, and Bernice is right there.
And the Bernice story is just filled with intrigue. Let's just leave it at that.
Yes.
It's filled with intrigue.
Yeah, if you'd like a good historical novel that was real.
Read
about Bernice.
Well, there's another character, though, and it's not a biblical character, but it is a person that we gain from a Christian perspective more insight than most, and it's a historian, Josephus, who is a Jew, and he is. Would you call him sort of a member of Titus's little entourage? How would you?
Oh, he was even more. You could say he was considered a family member.
Yeah,
he actually adopts the family name, Flavian, and when he goes to Rome, he changes his name basically from Joseph ben Matthew to Titus Flavius, which was both Titus and Vespasian's part of their name. He becomes Titus Flavius Josephus, and a fascinating person. He went from Jewish general fighting the Romans to what would you say? He was like one of the right-hand men of Titus when Titus in 68, 69, and then 70 makes the run on Jerusalem, and 70 particularly.
So we've got someone whose writings in the Jewish Wars and then his Antiquities gives us a understanding of what is going on around the culture at that time that makes the scriptures sort of come alive. In fact, I won't go too far into that, but so this is a guy.
He's the only describer of any of this. He's the only historian of that time. We would not know almost anything about Pharisees, scenes outside of the scripture.
Yep.
Josephus goes into detail about him, and even had investigated for his own spiritual life which one of these groups to become a part of early on. And so it is fascinating, because he paints a picture that the deal is, since he went from Jewish general to Roman supporter, and even standing at the walls of the temple in 70 before the temple falls, and says to the guys on the other side of the wall, "Hey, you're not going to win this.
It's not going to work."
God's on their side, basically. Yeah. And they compare Josephus to Jeremiah. In that Jeremiah knew that God had kind of abandoned the Judean dynasty, and it was going to fall. Jerusalem was going to fall, and that Nebuchadnezzar had the authority of God to take it. It says so in Scripture. And so, in the same way,
well, just Josephus records what Jesus is telling his disciples at the Mount of Olives, the Olivet Discourse. They're walking out of the temple, one of the last times, and Jesus is looking at these walls, saying, "Hey, don't marvel too much, because they're not going to stand anymore."
And one stone upon another. And Josephus is there when that happens.
That's right,
and describes it in detail. And so if you're interested in reading any of that, it's freely available online. Don't have to buy a big book or anything.
So again, it's one of the questions. Why do we bring up Josephus and in this study with Luke? And I'll set it up a little bit, and then I'll let you run. And that is, the critics. The higher critics will tell you that Luke and Acts were written far from the scene, meaning they were written before or after the temple was destroyed, probably in the 120 AD, versus written before the temple was destroyed in 62 AD, which is what we sort of suppose. And many scholars do too. So, where it comes
there are other scholars that think the way we do.
Where that comes into play is higher critics will say that Josephus's Antiquities and Jewish Wars were written first, and that whoever wrote the book of Luke and the book of Acts used the literary model of Josephus. Okay, because there's some similarities in how they open, and I mean, striking similarities. What we're supposing is that Luke and Josephus, hey, you know what? They probably did know each other, but not in the way that I'm going to use a word that can be a lightning rod, not the way liberal theologians will like. I guess that'll be the easiest thing. So, Gary, I'm going to leave it to you. How do we connect Luke and Josephus in this period of time, in this place, for this event?
Well, so when the war is over, when Jerusalem falls, Josephus stays with Vespasian and Titus wherever they go, and Bernice, because she's with Titus, and Agrippa too. He was in with this group as well, and had stayed with that leadership group the whole way. So this whole group travels together. they end up in Caesarea, and that's kind of the first celebration of victory. They end up in Alexandria, Egypt for a while, and then they end up in Rome. And this whole group is moving together they live together, essentially. They give Josephus, now that Vespasian's an emperor, they build an emperor's palace for him, but they give Josephus their home, their villa that was in Rome already for his house. They grant Josephus Roman citizenship. They grant him a pension, if you will, a paycheck for however long he lives from the Roman treasury to be able to do whatever he wants with his life, essentially. And so Josephus is with this whole group of people that Luke already knows from Scripture, from Paul's time in Caesarea, from the earthquake relief in Corinth. So this is like a group of people that when Luke comes, he knows all the other players in the sense that he has at least seen them, known them. And Josephus, this is an opportunity for them to meet, because there's no, as I thought about, all of this kind of came about. It was a long way around to answering the question. Usually, if you read a commentary on the Book of Acts, you will find them saying, was Luke affected by Josephus's writings, like you mentioned, Jewish wars and then antiquities? And I think it flips this on its head, and was Josephus affected by Luke? And it's probably both ways, in a sense that they kind of met at a time. Luke already had his book done, and Josephus had just finished, before Vesuvius erupted, he had finished the first edition of the Jewish Wars. He wrote it in Aramaic, fascinatingly enough, which would have been like his native tongue from the Holy Land, from Judea there. And it was supposedly, the guess is, meant for other large Jewish populations or other Semitic language populations that were planning on throwing the Romans off and rebelling. And he was saying, you're going to lose. Take a hint from the Jewish revolt. The Romans are going to be around, and they actually welcome diversity. As long as you behave, as long as you welcome them, they will welcome you. And so just see if you can get with the program. So actually, the Greek, which is all we have, the Aramaic copy's lost. The Greek edition is done in the early 80s, and after the Vesuvius initial recovery, and it's done by people that are helping with Greek. It's done with, and it's expanded. So we know that if they connected here at Vesuvius, one of the conversations, I imagine, is Luke starts talking to Josephus. I want to use the words that I had written, actually, and that would be, Certu, I am in the priestly line in the service of the Lord. Found from a particular Bible scholar in Australia who's written a whole book on Luke being a priest and having a priestly line. But I share your grief for Judea and the temple, yet I also share your conviction about God's will and the Roman peace. So he can make these connections with Josephus, because actually, if you think about the arc of Josephus's life, it's the same arc of Luke Acts. Josephus starts in Jerusalem and ends up in Rome. And that's where the book of Luke starts, with the priest Zechariah in Jerusalem, and it ends in the book of Acts with them, Paul in Rome. proclaiming the gospel. So the arc of the gospel of Jesus is this that's being told in Luke Acts is the same arc as Josephus's life, and so they've kind of got some things going on in common there. And then he can say, "So you were in Jerusalem in 57, really? Well, do you remember Paul of Tarsus, the temple riot at Pentecost, the Sanhedrin squabble, the heavenly armed midnight prisoner transfer to Caesarea, years of hearings in Caesarea? I was there too. In fact, I witnessed it up close and personal." And what ends up happening is in the later years, in Antiquities, that's where Josephus in like the 90s writes about Jesus, John the Baptist, James, the brother of Jesus, and the movements, just briefly about them. Now, that's another one of those controversial things, because we're divided by skeptics without proof, but we're divided by skeptics. The skeptics say, "Oh, some Christian came along and added that stuff later."
Yep.
And the people that they consider gullible are the people that say, "Well, we don't have any other copies of Josephus with anything else in them. All of them say this about Jesus, including that Jesus was the Messiah. Jesus was the Christ," which are some amazing words. He didn't write like what they asked Pilate to write. Jesus said he was the Christ. This guy claimed to be. He says he was the Christ. And so they, because they don't believe it, they make Josephus not believe it. And because Josephus didn't make a big deal of it, but was very subtle about it. Who knows? Anyway, did Josephus use the information that Luke gave him from Luke Acts when they traded? I believe they probably traded their books. Yeah. The newly Aramaic Jewish wars and the decade-old Luke Acts, and maybe Volume 3, like we pointed out already, in Paul's letters. Yeah. And they traded their books. And one of the clues to that is in Josephus, when he talks about Jesus and the church and the movement. It's called the Testimonium Flavium, often, or Testimonium Josephus. There's one particular scholar that has connected the description of Jesus as found, given by Jesus, though we don't know it's Jesus at the moment, in the 24th chapter of the Gospel of Luke, when they're walking on the road to Emmaus. There's a summary that Jesus is just some guy that's walking with the two on the road to Emmaus, remember? And it's Cleopas, and they didn't mention his name, and I think we mentioned that could have been Luke as well on that walk. And this guy that's walking with him, this kind of mysterious figure who didn't seem to know anything about it, actually starts telling them the law and the prophets, and describes the whole thing about Jesus. And you can find you can find amazing parallels between the way Josephus describes Jesus from that particular description. And those parallels are online, by the way, at on josephus.net. Gary Goldberg, who wrote the scholarly piece on it, has a side-by-side comparison of the two descriptions. So, yes, something happened there.
Something happened.
Yeah, and I think they traded. They had an influence on each other in the sense that we don't know what Luke might have written or done later with his life, but I think Josephus was the one that was affected in his writing by Luke, and maybe in his life, because the other piece that is in that compilation of Paul's letters in Volume 3, that again scholars are skeptical about at this point, but we really believe Hebrews was Paul and Luke's answer to the Jewish dilemma of losing the temple, the sacrifice, of losing Jerusalem, and the high priests, because there was someone who came and once and for all sacrificed his life and was accepted by God as that once and for all sacrifice, and that was Jesus, Messiah. And I believe reading that and reading the whole scope of the whole story, that Josephus may very well have come to the conclusion that Jesus was the Messiah. And praise the Lord for that.
I was going to use the word crazy. I'm going to change the word crazy to amazing. What an amazing arc we have.
Amazingly
here.
Crazy.
Yeah, amazingly crazy. So I just want to sum it in bullet points. Luke, by the ancient writings of the church fathers, knew Jesus, was probably a member of the 70, could have possibly been one of the disciples on the road to Emmaus that Jesus talked to after his resurrection. He's with Paul throughout many of his journeys. He's with Paul at the end, where he is able to basically research and write the Gospel of Luke and write the accounts of everything that happened, in the beginning of the church age, because he had both firsthand knowledge of it and also because he had research. Okay, both Acts,
access
and
to
Luke.
those people that lived it.
Yeah. So after Paul's death, he most likely scribed the book of Hebrews, which is very poignant because it's at the time that the temple is about ready to go. It's not going to be there. It's going to be wiped from the face of history. All we have left of it is the foundation stones. People talk about, there's still stones there. Yeah, those aren't the stones. Those are foundation.
That was the foundation.
Stones.
That's right.
Yeah, that's the foundation, not
and
the temple.
And in fact, they have found the stones that got wiped off the foundation down in the archaeological digs at the base of the temple.
So he's writing that probably right at the time that Paul has died, or it's right in that area. He takes this loop around, Gaul, Dalmatia, ends up in Corinth. He's been a witness to some of the most amazing things that connect the Roman Empire and the Jewish Empire, or the Jewish nation, or part, however you want to say that. And now he is at a point in time where he's able to reconnect some 20 years later with the key historian who is that just has a total parallel to his life from the other end. Mm-hmm. They're coming around like this.
Only 10 years, 11 years later.
Yeah. And we get all of this, and the critic is going to say, well, this can't be. It's sort of like the critics say, the book of Daniel can't be because it's too close to the truth, or the book of Jonah can't be because it's a whale's tale. All right. Problem is, Jesus himself, mentions both of those guys. All right. So what an amazing thing that we have here, because Luke is this figure that seems, that he's a Gentile. Well, maybe not, maybe not.
Hellenistic Jew who had, in a priestly line, possibly. There were 20,000 men in the priestly line in the time of when Josephus was writing about the Jewish war. So, that's pretty amazing. They're spread all over the diaspora.
Yeah. So you cannot make this up. I mean, now, again, it's how you want to look at it. Do you want to look at it as as a critic, or do you want to look at it as, oh my goodness, God put all this in place and put these men in such a place for such a time that they connect with each other? I'm sort of going with the God standpoint versus the other standpoint. But I mean, this is amazing when you think about it, because a lot of times what you get is the critics talking about there's no outside information of the Bible, of the New Testament. Well, yeah, I guess there is. there is. Sorry, I mean, here's a couple of volumes if you want to take the time to read them. But what an amazing story! What an amazing time, and it fits together. Again, a lot of what we're doing is fitting puzzle pieces together.
Yeah, essentially, or I'm going to say, I was thinking while you were mentioning it, it's like you've got dots,
yeah,
and there's no numbers on the dots. Okay, but so you can attempt to connect the dots in a reasonable way, and there's a picture there, and it makes sense. Or you could just, in the modern art, you would just leave the dots there and just say, "Wow, isn't that profound? All those dots where they are." Well, they don't even think it's profound necessarily. It's just more like, "Oh, that's art, huh?" So I prefer, the dots connected are an amazing story of God, and it's like it is too good to be true, but God's too good to be true. Our God is an amazing God, and He has just laid out some amazing facts for us to be able to find and to connect those dots to say, suppose if that's really true.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, I'll leave with one last comment. I've always said, I wish I knew what Jesus said to those two travelers on the road to Emmaus. And I've never gone and looked at Josephus's connection of that. Maybe we have what Jesus said to those two on the road to Emmaus, because
in other ways,
Luke shared it with Josephus in 79, 80 AD, probably sitting there by a campfire after a hard day of disaster relief work, somewhere in the Naples area, because of Mount Vesuvius. That's pretty cool.
Amen.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, amen to that.
So, well, there we go. I think we covered that probably pretty good. What an amazing story! So much more to even learn and talk about it, but at least it gives you a sort of deeper outline of it. We're going to go in our next session to something that goes to the personality and the gifts that God gives us, and how they can be used. And it may seem strange that you can actually have a gift and a talent that is different than what you use in your day-to-day job. So with that, why don't we end this session with prayer, unless you have anything else that you want to throw out there.
I think we've made the journey.
There you go.
I might just mention that with the holiday season and this week upcoming, it's Operation Christmas Child's shoebox collection, and they are working all around the world in countries all over the world with the children particularly, but they also do amazing disaster relief work as well. And as you mentioned earlier, Samaritan's Purse and places they go where they may not be necessarily welcome for their Christian viewpoint, but they go to show the practical love of God in toughest of times for many people. And I'd just like us to remember that and to encourage you as a part of a response to whatever time you're going to watch this, to find out more about them, and to find out about Samaritan's Purse and Operation Christmas Child, and participate. Pack a box around the holiday time, as well as see what you can do all year round for them. And they put out some great videos of what they're doing all around the world, and it's worthy of finding that out from them, or whatever other organizations you're involved with Christian Disaster Relief, ADRN, where we live, Austin Disaster Relief Network. But there's probably somebody involved with things that you want to be involved with, and we just urge you to put it into action, because God so loved the world that he gave his son. And God has a cosmic view, a world view of what's the story that's going on, and we encourage you to get involved with it that way.
Amen.
So that's an open-eyed prayer in Jesus' name. Go and
Amen. All righty. Until next time, may God be with you.
Amen.